Talks. Nicki Talks is a series of conversations with people from around Cape Ann to learn more about what they do and why they do it. So today I am really pleased to have as my guest Brian King, who is a singer, songwriter, performer, and also a community activist. So welcome, Brian.
Thanks, Nicki. Thanks for having me. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. So I always start off with sort of some history questions, a little bit about you. And for starters, how did you come to be on Cape Ann, and how long have you been here?
My whole life. I was born at Addison Gilbert when babies were still born there. I believe so. I've checked with my mom, but I'm pretty sure. Yeah, so I've been in the zip code since day one. Yeah.
Oh, boy, yeah. And have you moved and come back, or?
I went to UMass Amherst for a bit. Yeah. I lived in Somerville. I lived in Dorchester, Lynn, a couple other places. But I was in Dorchester the most recently before moving back to Cape Ann about 2-3 years ago. Yeah.
And are your parents natives as well?
Yeah, my dad's.
So you really have the generational thing happening.
Yeah, mom's Rockport, dad's Lanesville.
Oh, boy.
And they discuss that all the time,
yeah.
what that means.
It's a badge. It's a badge of honor. Yeah. And everybody always comes back, to Cape Ann. Not everybody, but a lot of people. So I know that you have a long and ongoing history of community activism, maybe across several different disciplines. So maybe you could just talk a little bit about, how that began or where you began in terms of community work and how it's kind of, evolved up to the current.
Well, the major activism I've done and advocacy has been around LGBT, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender issues. Growing up gay on Cape Ann, there weren't a lot of resources, or I didn't have a lot of access to community growing up. It was before the internet, so aging myself, but I
right.
couldn't just simply find something online, so it started with just finding mentors, people in the community, whether they be musicians or artists. Garrett Lansing was a great mentor of mine, a poet who passed away this year.
Yes.
I met him when I was around 15. Oh. And my friend Joanne Schreiber, I don't know if you knew Joanne back in the day. She was a guitar player. So these folks came into my life, and then we kind of would come together and, make events for LGBT people, start coffee houses, and just gatherings.
Like around when are we talking?
The 90s.
Okay.
Yeah, mid-90s.
Yeah.
So we would do things at Art Space, the Rockport Community House, a glass sailboat when that was here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, huh. And how do you see, and now that we're on this particular topic, but how do you see, in terms of the social environment, I guess, on Cape Ann, over the last, 10, 15, 20 years, the evolution of acceptance or just the climate for LGBTQ folks? I mean, how has that changed? Have you seen it change?
I think it's changed in a big way. It's always individual. I used to run an LGBT youth group out of Lawrence, so that, it's a different community than Cape Ann. But when I would hear the stories that the kids were telling about their families, you'd have one child coming from a family where everyone was really accepting, and another where it was the opposite.
Right.
And I think that still happens here too. We don't know what goes on behind the closed doors necessarily in families, but I think also a lot has changed, and mostly through media, storytelling, movies. I think celebrities coming out is huge. People like Ellen. We can't underestimate that impact of having someone who's out lesbian in your living room every day.
Yeah.
Really demystifies and de-others, people who are LGBT. So I think it's changed a lot. When I was young, there really was no Gay Straight Alliance or any sort of groups at the high school. And now there are, so having adults, when I was there, there were some supportive teachers one-on-one, but generally it was kind of looked the other way from bullying and whatnot. Yeah. So I think that has changed. So kids are growing up in a more accepting environment, hopefully. And,
so kind of like Cape Ann is mirroring the rest of the country, hopefully, or portions of the country.
I think so. I mean, I don't know what it's like to be a teenager right now today. So, except for what I've, the stories I've heard, but it sounds like it's different.
Yeah, that's a good thing. And so you started by doing that work, and then I know you've done a few other things. And can you say what you're doing now and how that maybe moved into that?
Yeah, sure. So right now I'm HIV medical case manager at the North Shore Health Project. North Shore Health Project has been around since 1988, so 30 years.
Wow. Yeah.
People started the North Shore Health Project to deal with the HIV/AIDS epidemic. Family members, friends, who people in their lives who were impacted by HIV/AIDS or were dying at that time of HIV/AIDS came together to pool resources, as you know, and then that's expanded to be case management for people living with HIV is what I do. We also have case management for folks with Hep C.
And that would include things like housing or economic instability, or is it sort of a wraparound thing like that?
It's, when someone's getting a new HIV diagnosis, it depends on where they're at, but I'll help them balance all of those things that might be hard to manage, like housing, health insurance, doctor's visits, if they need any sort of disability, homelessness, and all of those issues come to play, and it's very individualized. Some folks, it's more about social isolation and the stigma around HIV that still exists.
I was just going to ask about that. What sort of world does somebody who's recently diagnosed as HIV positive, what's at this point in time, like what do they see ahead? I mean, I read somewhere recently that there's a little bit of an uptick in numbers. Is that true? I mean,
it's pretty much group based from what I understand. So general new HIV infections have gone down across the board, but then you'll see an uptick in youth. So even though it's gone down in everybody else, it's doubled in youth. I don't have the numbers right in front of me, and those things can be alarming, or there can be new infections, a bunch of new infections in one area, one part of the state or one part of the country where they go, okay, what's going on here? But as far as new infections go, it's not over. It's not necessarily easy, but the thing that makes it the most difficult for folks now who are newly infected, I would say, is the stigma and the misinformation that's out there. So now when someone is infected, most likely the doctor is going to find a medication that gets them to undetectable, a 1 pill a day, when I work with people who used to take 30 pills a day.
Yeah, right. So undetectable meaning in a blood test you wouldn't detect the HIV virus?
Yeah, they can't actually find the virus. Wow. It's still there. They're not cured.
So it's dormant or something.
Yeah, but it's so little it doesn't even show up in the blood. It's like under so many copies, and what we know now, as far as the statistics and the studies over years have shown that if someone is living with HIV, they're taking their medication every day, they're undetectable, they can't transmit that virus to somebody else. There's just not enough virus in them to infect someone else.
Oh, that's really interesting. I did not know any of that.
Yeah, it's amazing. So they call that treatment as prevention, or undetectable means untransmittable. U equals U. And it's incredible.
Yeah, it really is.
So someone, if they're at risk for HIV, say having unprotected sex or using needles, or have a partner who's positive and doesn't know their status, that's the real risk, is if someone thinks they're negative, hasn't been tested in 5 years, has some risk, but then says, oh yeah, I'm fine. Right. So really testing and treatment is some of the best prevention.
And what's the relationship, and I'll be like, sort of showing off my ignorance a little bit here, but can you help people understand, as well as myself, that what is the relationship between Hep C and HIV?
Well, they're different viruses. Hep C attacks the liver, and it's transmitted primarily blood to blood. Right. It's much more infectious than HIV. And from what I understand, I'm not a doctor, but for all the trainings I've gone to and whatnot. So there's just a lot more of the virus, say, in a drop of blood than there would be HIV. And it can live longer. And
And would the
it's a little more
same
resistant.
sort of scenario be true for people who have Hep C in terms of there is medication available that would put them in a place where they could live for a long time with it? They might not transmit it. Is it similar or not so much?
It's different because Hep C now for the majority of people is curable.
Okay.
So
okay.
they can go on
That's a really
medication.
critical
I think it's
difference,
a 3-month regimen of medication, and we have a Hep C case manager at the Health Project that helps folks manage the side effects and just adhering to that regimen, and then most people can be cured.
Yep.
There are some people who have maybe some drug resistance, but. And someone could still be reinfected. You can cure yourself and then down the line become reinfected.
Yeah.
But that's the difference where HIV, there's no cure, but someone can become very healthy. And something I want to stress is that people who've been living with HIV for a long time, who maybe got it in the 80s or 90s when we didn't have these modern medications, often are still dealing with the damage caused by the virus or the side effects from those medications. Back then, they still have those issues.
Yeah, of course.
So it's not over for them. So you can't say like, oh, it's a new time. There's a lot of people who are still dealing with with stuff all the time that can be debilitating. But someone today, I might get a new client who finds out they're HIV positive, and they get on a 1 pill a day, and they may have no side effects.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And people have said to me, it's like I don't even know that I have it. Like,
yeah, that's really great.
It's such a different time.
Such a different time. So just to stay sort of on the topic and pay attention to the time, I don't think that you've always done the LGBT work and the HIV work. You've done other stuff as a advocate and activist and.
Yeah, I worked. It's been mostly, I guess, LGBT focused or HIV focused because I saw the need and the way that HIV has affected the LGBT community is something. I have friends that lost
so that's how it's
HIV
all
and
connected
AIDS,
for you. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's music is part of it too because I'm a musician, and I really got into this work because I used to go to this program called the Gay and Bi Men's Health Program that was at Gloucester Prevention. In the 90s.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So 20-something years ago. And it was a great resource for me. And then the director was David Goodrow, and he became a fan of my music. And then I would help kind of organize some music nights. And then I started doing some outreach for them. And then I started working for them. Then David moved on, and I became the director. And so I've been in public health now for like 15 years.
Yeah. So that's really interesting. So let's move into the musician Brian King, and talk a little bit about that. Were you always? When did you first start making music? Were you a kid?
Yeah, I wrote my first song at 6.
I'd call that a kid.
6 or 7. I'll never forget it. It was my cousin Nicole, who lives in Gloucester, and she's 1 year older than me, and we were hanging out and playing. And she said, "Let's write a song." And I said, "We can do that?" She said, "Yeah, why not?" I think she even came up with a band name and everything. Like, we wrote one song on my dad's guitar, not even knowing how to make chords or anything.
So there was music already going on in your family because your father was
My dad played a little guitar, and my older brother Dan King, who's been featured on Alan Estes show and whatnot, and plays around town and beyond Gloucester as well. He was playing music, but my dad was I think a huge influence with music because he just listened to it all the time in the car, and he loved the Eagles. He still loves the Eagles and Fleetwood Mac. And heard a lot of this sort of.
So that was all part sort of in your early years.
Yeah,
that's great. That's great. And so to fast forward a little bit, now I know that your band is called, what time is it, Mr. Fox? And I think there are 5 members of the band.
Yes, you got it. Yeah,
5
right
members
now.
of the band.
Yeah, sometimes we have some extra folks that join us, but
yeah.
At one point we were 11 when we would play shows in New York.
So how long has that band been together? And I know Nathan Cohen.
Nathan and I started playing. Oh my God, 2001, I think. He and I did just a one-off show for Rockport New Year's Eve at the UU Church. I had known Nathan just from around, and he had been a fan of another band I was in, and I knew he played fiddle, and he did some playing on a recording, and then we just did this one night. I said, hey, you want to join me? And he said, great. And it was before he took off for a year to be in Italy and Turkey. He took this year-long trip. But I had recorded the night that we performed on New Year's Eve, and people started making copies of it. You know, I kept hearing like, "Oh, I heard that recording," and I'm like, "Really?" People I didn't know would come up to me, and so we felt like there was some sort of musical chemistry there.
Yeah.
So when he came back, that's when we really started playing in earnest, I think. And then it just kept growing. You know.
and so besides Nathan, who else is in the band who's kind of a constant?
Yeah, right now the core members are Nathan Cohen on fiddle and trumpet, and Renee Dupuis, who's an amazing singer. A lot of people have heard her around town. And she also teaches. She's a great songwriter and a great pianist and plays melodica. Her husband, Joe Cardoza, who's an incredible bassist, who runs the open jam with the local open Monday night jam with Dennis Monacle, who's a drummer. So
at the Rumline?
It was at the Rumline. They've moved it to Minglewood.
Okay.
Until Minglewood closes for the winter, and then it might just kind of, who knows where it's going to go. It's going to be a secret. I guess.
Yeah.
But so it's Joe, Nathan, Renee, Dennis, and me. Yeah.
And how busy are you making music? I mean, is that like a big part of what you do?
Yeah, it's a huge part of my life. I'm always writing songs, writing lyrics, whenever I get a moment, playing tons of gigs.
Yeah.
And right now we're working on a musical. We're going to be performing it. It's not inked, but it's pretty much set. We're going to be doing it at the planetarium at the Museum of Science in the summer of 2019.
That's a great place to do it.
Yeah. So it's going to be like animation, visuals, and dialogue and music, and it's a retelling of it's sort of a feminist retelling of Medusa.
No kidding.
Yeah. So.
Oh, I'm in.
Yeah, I hope you can come.
I definitely will come.
Yeah, we hope. I mean, we're hoping it's going to come together the way we envision
it. Great. Oh my gosh.
We have a lot of work this winter.
I remember reading. I can't remember who wrote the book or the play, but I remember reading a piece about a playwright who went into a women's prison, and the women recreated Medusa. Wow. So I only know a little bit about it because I didn't read fully the whole thing, but it's pretty incredible.
She's such a great symbol. And I was just in Greece, in Crete, doing some research about the ancient mythology and how far it goes back. With the story and symbol of Medusa and her connection maybe to even earlier religions and whatnot. It was really cool. Yeah.
So how do you see? You sort of touched on this, but how do you see the importance of your work with LGBT population kind of coming? How do those two things kind of come together and interact with your music?
I was just reading something the other day about. It was a beautiful poem a friend just posted, and I wish I knew the author. I can't say it off. I think I read it this morning. About it was a poem about a guy who kissed another guy just like on their doorstep, and how they got a couple weird looks, and that the shooter at the Pulse massacre talked about seeing two men kissing and being triggered by that, and. Just to that two guys showing affection for each other is still so political, like that. Just two people who are in love or care for each other. Have a kiss like you've seen in Hollywood a million times in every show, and your parents and people just showing affection for each other can be a political act. So in the music, I found that I forget it sometimes, that I just being who I am. Singing songs about past boyfriends and whatnot seems pretty normal to me, but recently we did a show in Brooklyn. We did a house concert, and there was someone there from a country where people are not out where it's, I think it's actually, it's dangerous and illegal. And the person had never even seen someone mention being in a relationship with another guy and then singing a song about it. And that was like one person in the room who was new to the country and
wow.
And so something that just seems I take for granted sometimes, and then I realize, it can be powerful just to
absolutely
sing
that's
songs
a great
about
example.
how. So it's not like every song I write is like, it's really hard being gay, It's more like, it's hard being in a relationship with this guy who's so complicated.
It's hard
maybe
being in a
because of
relationship,
some of
period.
those issues. Exactly.
Yeah. So I read a quote on, I think it was on the Mr. Fox website. You're very familiar with this quote, and you can tell me who said it. I'll just tell you the quote. The last sound I want to hear before I go to sleep is Brian King, to ensure a beautiful dream. Who said that?
Whoopi Goldberg one night. Yeah, when she was at Captain Carlos.
Yeah. So you played there?
Yeah, actually, it's one of the places that Mr. Fox started.
Okay.
Nathan and me and Mike Leggio, who was the bassist at the time. And he still steps in now and then. Great guy. We played as a trio there every Thursday. And then I sang in the Gloucesterians every Friday.
The Gloucesterians.
So I was kind of like at Captain Carlos, all the time, and sometimes late into the night, and Whoopi would hang out. And,
I remember her.
And she was a big supporter at the time. She really
so great
would, give me encouragement. And one night she came. She's like, "I'm staying because I want to hear your voice. It's the last thing I want to hear because I want to have good dreams." And that was very sweet.
So we have a few minutes left, and I know I'm hoping that we'll have time to end with a song. Mm-hmm. But another quote that I read, and then I'm hoping that you'll just talk really quickly about the last piece that I saw, which the name of which is written here. Gravitational Fool. Mm-hmm. But before that, one of the descriptors I read on the website about the music of your band is that it was like an emotional striptease.
Yeah.
You look as surprised as me.
Yeah.
So what exactly do you think? I mean, what does that mean?
Well, for me, you came to the show Gravitational Fool. We did it at Endicott, and we're still doing it in some other places. It's a show, we did it at the ART in Cambridge not this summer, but the summer before. It started in this place, this festival called Afterglow in Provincetown. And Gravitational Fool is a show where when you're growing up and you see all of these gay characters on TV, especially in the 80s and whatnot, there were a lot of stereotypes. And so the show looks at those stereotypes, like the evil, kind of effeminate, guy who's always, the 007's always like, trying to get. And and so I kind of embody those characters and have monologues about my own life, but through their voices, like as you saw.
I did.
But in a way, it's me stripping off those characters. So in that way, it's kind of an emotional striptease.
Or stripping down. Yeah, right.
Yeah, like, I think, and it doesn't matter who you are. Media tells you should be like that. You should have this much. You should be this big, and you should be or this skinny, and this. And then people start taking that stuff in, and then, you get to a place where like, okay, who am I in this? And some stuff you have to strip off, and some of the stuff you keep. But you want to do it with intention. Like that.
How is it for you to do that show?
Yeah. It's pretty. It's great because people seem to really respond to it.
Yeah.
People are crying at the end and stuff. And I'm taking it for granted that I'm just telling my story, and then you realize, this
really
is connecting.
Impacting people emotionally. Yeah, I thought it was very emotional, actually. Yeah. And beautiful.
Thank you.
Just beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I raved about it. So I think we're going to end with your song. So I'm going to thank you now, Brian, for being on the show.
This went by fast.
And I know, it goes very fast. And we're going to end with a song called Cold Rain.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Nicki.
Yeah.
All right. You say you don't want me,
that's easy to believe. I can feel it in your fingers, in the very way that you breathe. You wanna be fair. Well, none of this is. 'Cause when I'm gonna need you near, you'll be far and free from this. Whoa, my, 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 my. Oh, my, 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 my. Here it comes. Here it comes. No place to run, nowhere to hide from this cold rain inside. Here it comes, washing down. It's deep and dark, it's hard and wide, this cold rain inside.